Waiters/waitresses, what is the worst first date you've witnessed? Does my first date count? Not too long ago. I was 18 and we went to a small cafe. Not the most glamorous, but he and I had known each other a while, and both agreed we wanted somewhere pretty basic. As we were talking, I noticed this older woman across from us giving us nasty looks. If looks could kill, I would have died 10 years ago, and talking to her husband, who was obviously trying to get her to quiet down. Keep in mind we're two guys on a date in the conservative South. Now at this point he hasn't noticed her and I haven't said anything. I get up to use the restroom and this lady gets up and grabs my arm and starts mouthing off about how inappropriate it is to be acting this way with someone of the same sex and spouting off a bunch of Bible-thumping garbage. I look at my date and he is super bewildered. The husband grabs his wife's arm and says, "Go get in the goddamned car, we're leaving," and escorts her out the door. The husband actually came back and apologized before offering to cover our bill. We declined but appreciated the gesture. Damn Southern gentlemen didn't know they still existed. Well done, random dude. Couple years ago, I was tending bar at a high-end steak joint. A pretty brunette walked in and sat down at the bar. After fixing her a cocktail, I asked if she'd like to see a dinner menu. She explained that she was waiting for a date. A few moments later, the guy arrived carrying a large bag. It was immediately obvious this date was their first. Their conversation was lurching from forced to downright painful when he reached into the bag and pulled out an album containing his Pokemon card collection. He set the book on the bar and thumbed through each page, thoroughly and lovingly describing every card, attempting to educate his date in the ways of Japanese pocket monsters. I'll be fair to the guy, dude was passionate. She feigned an emergency and called her friend to pick her up. He stayed and ate a plain hamburger at the bar. Edit, both of these people were in their mid-30s. If showing a girl your holographic Charizard card doesn't get you laid, then I don't know what will. I'm not even into Pokemon, but I've seen some of those holographic cards and they are just really awesome little works of art. I had the shortest date table once. I knew it was a first date because I'd greeted the lady and directed her to the bar while she waited for her date to arrive, and then saw them introducing themselves when he finally showed up. They ended up in my section, her with an almost empty martini, him still drinkless. Looked like the small talk was going somewhat well. Normal first approach, "Good evening, blah blah, what can I get you to drink, sir?" He orders a Jack and Coke or something similar, I can't remember exactly, and I ask the lady if I can get her another. Before she has a chance to answer, the guy interrupts and says a water will be fine for her. Normally, I'd ignore a comment like that or pretend like I didn't understand and ask her directly again, but didn't even have a chance. She went off on him, "How dare you?" etc. and stood up, apologized to the small dining room and to me, and walked out. Though clearly embarrassed and speechless, the guy stayed and continued to order dinner for himself anyway. Super awkward. Tipped me well low if I remember correctly. I had a guy come in who was supposed to meet his date there. He waited for a bit and I made sure to check on him quite often to make sure he was good. After about 30 minutes of him nervously waiting, he finally gave up and motioned me for the bill. He got a drink and a very small appetizer while waiting. I told him not to worry about and genuinely felt bad for him. I hope he's happy with someone now. This has happened to me. It was supposed to be the third date though. She said she was leaving and would be there in 20 minutes. I got there in 15. After another 40, she texted to say she got held up, but was leaving right now. She only lived 5 minutes away. After 10 minutes, the bartender and I started pounding shots. We knew each other. Didn't even bother calling or texting her after that, and I never heard from her again. Got a lift home. Not a server, but I was hanging out at the coffee shop, and I can see that there were two people there clearly on first online date. "So you like sushi?" "Yes, my profile is accurate. I'm a bartender at Popular Burger and Wine Bar." I had an older gentleman, about 60 years old, come in on a Wednesday evening and order a bottle of wine and 2 glasses as he's waiting for someone to show. This other older woman shows up a short while later and both of them hit it off. They sat themselves right behind my pos, so basically anytime I had to ring something in I had a front row seat to their date. Both of them crush 3 bottles of wine and sit there for about 4 hours talking away. Around the 4th hour of them sitting they both started making out randomly and will not stop. They started sucking faces with an uncomfortable intensity, somewhat terrifying all my bar guests and myself. At one point the older fella leaves for the bathroom and his date proceeds to let me know it's their first time meeting. Not entirely the worst first date for them I suppose, but definitely was for me and the other customers. Damn. Am I just a prude, or does 3 bottles between 2 people sound like sloppy drunk level for most people? 2.5 glasses each per bottle, 7.5 glasses of wine over 4 hours is reasonably tipsy emo, but I'd probably have been categorized as a functional alcoholic for about 15 years. Not me, but my cousin was a waitress for a while during college. She was serving this couple who said absolutely nothing to each other the entire time. She serves them, this man orders every fucking thing on the damn menu, then twice over for the desserts menu, I shit you not, he eats barely 1/6 of what he ordered before he just gets up and leaves. The poor woman, who was already acting really quiet and shy as it is, was left with some $200 on the tab. She was quiet, but when asked where the man went, she insisted that he just went to get his wallet from the car. This was a blatant lie, as my cousin saw his ass take off. This man was apparently seen on a couple other dates doing the same thing to different women in my area. Never caught, always left a massive fucking bill for the ladies each time. Haven't heard of it in a while, but that poor lady my cousin saw firsthand. She was still held liable for that dab. If someone did this to me, I'd insist on treating it as a split check and have the restaurant treat him as stealing his half. That's incredibly fucked up. This probably doesn't compare to some of these freak show stories, but I'll tell it anyways. I worked for IHOP for a very long 3 months. Most of my experiences were decent. On one occasion, one of my acquaintances came in with a date. We had been friends as kids and still sometimes chatted amicably. At this time, I had a stutter that would happen if I spoke too quickly, was stressed, or just trying to speak hard words. I went up to their table, said hi to my friend and her date, and instantly flubbed the greeting with a stutter. Honestly, my stutter has never bothered me, never felt like a bad thing until that moment. Her date looked at me, did that little condescending laugh that we've all heard before, and then repeated what I said while mocking my stutter. I could see my friend physically recoil from him, her face clearing, showing a "did you really just act that way?" expression. At the time, I just brushed it off. It bothered me for about 2 seconds in the moment, but even years later I still haven't forgotten. Still, I could tell with that one little moment of assholery, my friend was not gonna go on a second date with him. As well she shouldn't. Absolutely uncalled for. Not a waiter, but I cannot miss the opportunity to share this story. Friend and I meet up in a chain restaurant for a meal and a catch-up. In the booth across from us are a guy and a girl in their 20s, very obviously on a date. Things seem to be going moderately well, just kind of let them do their thing in the background as my friend and I chat about life and stuff. Then, guy stands up halfway through the girl's sentence, cutting her off. It's quite a violent standing, so draws the attention of most tables nearby. Guy then says this in a way that makes me think he has rehearsed. "I'm sorry, Jen. I just wanted to give women one more chance, but I can't do it. You're lively, but women just aren't doing it for me." Guy throws some money on the table and walks out. Jen kinda sits there with everyone looking at her, going redder and redder. Lovely waitress swoops in and saves the day for her, but wow. Never seen anything that completely insane before or since. At least just wait for the date to be over and politely decline a second. TL, doctor, guy decides he was gay mid-hetero date, stands up, loudly renounces women and leaves his date embarrassed as all hell. I feel so bad for the girl. Damn, that must be so embarrassing, I can't imagine. Why didn't he just do it private? I'm a host at a restaurant, but my first week working, a gay couple got in a fight in the middle of their meal, drawing attention from everyone in the restaurant. Before my manager could step in and stop it, one stood up and shouted, "You're the reason most people are straight," and left. I've always thought about how it is both a roast or compliment depending on sexuality. Fucking got 'em. I'm not service staff, but I often eat/drink alone and people watch, and first dates are almost always painfully obvious. Worst one I ever saw, two people who were probably perfect for each other, they were both completely self-absorbed. How completely? They both started stories and kept telling them at the same time. They weren't even listening, just talking at each other. I was enraptured by the sheer insanity of it. I didn't eat for like 45 minutes as they both just yapped away, barely stopping. Hello, fellow person who eats alone. And here I am going to the movies alone and then eating at home like a sucker. Next time I'm grabbing dinner and a movie. I have no idea if they were on a date or been married for too long, but this. We had our flight cancelled due to a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. The only place open for dinner was an Indian restaurant. There were a few customers in there. It was an interesting looking bunch, sort of what you'd expect eating out on Christmas Eve. This one couple though looked to be in their 40s. A guy and a woman. She never said a word and looked like she was in a trance. The guy though kept talking at her in this slow monotone. "And another thing I hate about you," and proceeded to critique her while she continued to stare into space. Greater than she never said a word and looked like she was in a trance. The guy though kept talking at her in this slow monotone. "And another thing I hate about you," and proceeded to critique her while she continued to stare into space. Sounds like a long-term abusive relationship. At some point she mentally checked out because she's heard it all before. Hope she eventually ditched him. I have been that woman, except I am a man. There is no fighting it. That silence is coping, no doubt. I was a pro. I hope she ditched him, too. Over time, I learned to hate myself just as much as she hated me, and I treated myself accordingly. Getting out was very difficult, but it literally saved my life. I wish I could have recognized the signs of abuse before I got sucked in so deep. I lived that torment for 3 years. Please, if anybody treats you like this, do everything you can to get away. They'll have excuses, and they'll make promises, and they'll threaten all sorts of nasty upon you and suicide upon themselves, and they'll cajole and cry and manipulate the crap out of you, and they'll physically prevent you from getting away from them, but be strong. It's worth it to love yourself again. /soapbox. But no apologies. Domestic abuse is a topic I have very strong feelings about. Probably not the worst, but only last night. A couple came in, Aussie guy and Japanese girl. She wasn't great at English but understood enough to order for herself and have a short little conversation with me while he was in the bathroom. The whole time he kept treating her like it was her first day in Australia and made the date seem more like a language lesson, getting her to translate words and acting like she didn't understand even when she clearly said "I understand." Was rough. Girl and guy came into the barbecue restaurant I worked at. They met at the door exchanging the usual "hi, nice to meet you," etc. The guy was a complete dick. She ordered ribs and he said, "Do you want to keep that hot figure of yours or look like that chick over there?" Points to slightly overweight woman / then, when they were waiting to pay, he starts flirting with the chick behind them. She deadass waited until he paid then left without waiting for the food. Greater than meets girl at barbecue place. Greater than girl orders barbecue. Greater than tells girl if she eats barbecue she'll get fat. That's a bold strategy, cotton. Not a way to butt. Me and my GF sat next to an obvious first date at a Pan-Asian fusion restaurant, Zen in Durham, UK. She comments that her main course wasn't quite what she expected and thought it'd be spicier. He then snaps his fingers above his head very loudly so half the restaurant turns round to look and a waitress rolls her eyes and goes over. He demands that they cook it again and make it hotter. Next thing, there's half a dozen Thai waitresses around the table calling him worse than shit in Thai, my Thai GF translated, causing a massive scene while her face turns red and they take her plate away. She then has to sit with no food while he continues eating. He eventually realizes he's fucked up and stops eating, but she sarcastically tells him to enjoy his food. They brought her a fresh plate and they eat in silence. First and I'm sure the last date. How hungry I was, I would not eat whatever was put on that girl's new plate. I was involved in the date, but the story is about my waiter. It's a first date from a plenty of fish lady who I had been chatting with. It's at a medium-tier Italian restaurant in North Kansas City. I get there and my waiter is a shaved head, huge muscular guy, very low-key and professional. I get a glass of wine waiting for my date. I eventually get a second glass of wine. About 30 minutes into it and no text responses, I tell him I'll just order some food to go. Guy is a total professional, doesn't let on anything about what is obviously happening to me. Finally he brings the back with the to-go order in it, sets it on the table and leans in and says I put some extra biscuits in there. I tipped him well and left. I was hanging out at Starbucks and witnessed a horrible date. She was Japanese and he started off by showing her his shirt with sumo wrestlers on it, then would ask questions like, "What's your favorite sushi? Do you only speak Japanese? How do you say toilet in Japanese? They have sumo in Japan, right? Did you see my shirt?" It was so amazingly awkward I bought another cup of coffee to listen to the entire thing. Greater than it was so amazingly awkward I bought another cup of coffee is that the Starbucks version of getting your popcorn so you can sit back and watch. It sure is smile. Oh man, thanks for asking this one. I've got a great one. Happened at my former restaurant. Reservation for 6 o'clock, young guy comes in a few minutes early, tells me he's kind of nervous because it's a first date and he hasn't had many before, blah blah blah, kind of sweet really. Anyways, girl arrives about half an hour late, and proceeds to get very, very drunk. About midway through the meal, she answers her phone, takes the call, and starts talking about her date, in front of her date, saying stuff like, well, he's not usually my type, I don't exactly like him, but I felt like why not, right in front of him. Young man looks so discouraged, walks up to me, pays his bill, and leaves. He's a really nice guy, he's come to the place I work at now a few times. Wow, he is that inexperienced but still not desperate, good for him. Couple in their mid-20s comes in, it's obviously a first date but they seem to really like each other and are getting along well. I wasn't serving them, however, I was serving the table next to them. About halfway through their meal I notice them holding hands over the table. Cute. Then, the guy lifts her hand to his lips and kisses the back of it. A bit of an outdated gesture, but still cute I guess. The woman seems slightly confused but goes along with it. A little while later I see the guy do it again. Okay, dude. Then again. Woman is confused and looks a little uncomfortable. They are no longer holding hands. I go to serve my table and see the dude full on making out with her hand, tongue and all. Woman looks extremely embarrassed and uncomfortable, looking everywhere but at her date. I go over and casually ask if they need anything, and the dude stops. Woman yanks her hand back. She left pretty soon after. This isn't as bad as some of the others, but the guy and girl arrived separately and it seemed like they were meeting for the first time at the restaurant. They sat down, then the girl excused herself and went to the bathroom. The guy ordered drinks for them both while she was gone, then, after like 30 minutes, ordered 2 meals. It was so obvious she wasn't coming back, but he kept calling her and eventually just left all the food and drink untouched and paid the bill. This is heartbreaking. Everybody hurts. There was this young guy eating dinner with his mom. I noticed they seemed weirdly uncomfortable and distant but didn't think much of it. Turns out the lady was not his mom. He had met her on a dating site and had been very clearly catfished. The lady was at least a good 20 years older than him. When she left the restaurant he stayed behind and told me about what happened, then asked me out. I politely declined but agreed with him that that was a really weird situation. This actually happened to me. Expected to meet a girl at the restaurant who was around my age at the time, 27, but it was a woman closer to 50. She was my age when I was born. We had nothing in common and pretty sure she was using her daughter's pictures on her profile. You said you were 27. Well, I was, once. He reached for his water and punched it directly into her lap. During my first date with my now boyfriend, he reached across the table and hit a ceramic mug which flew off the table and shattered onto my unsuspecting toes. I was picking ceramic shards out of my foot for the rest of the day. And yet it somehow worked out for him, huh? I was working at a rundown pizza place. The dude starts checking me out / ogling me in front of his date. I felt so bad because the girl he was with looked like she put so much effort into her look. She was also out of the dude's league. She noticed. Thankfully she wasn't rude to me as I think she recognized my discomfort. I had a two-top in a small booth and across from them was a family of 6. The two-top was in their mid-40s, maybe 50. I was delivering food to the 6-top and I was being berated for not using legs with my big trays, so I grabbed a pair and headed off. When I was setting them down, a stacked plate on my tray shifted to the side and the whole tray pitched toward the 6-top. I panicked and tried to stop it from falling and it all went backwards off the tray. Unluckily I didn't hear a single plate shatter. I turned around and the woman at the 2-top had rib sauce on her face, mashed potatoes in her bust, and broccoli all over her lap. I started with, "I'm so sorry mom. Please stand up and we'll get you cleaned up." My 6-top was forgotten at that moment. I pleaded with her to get up so we could clean her off. Someone produced a towel for me. I had 2 managers trying to help. She was so polite and insistent that it was nobody's fault. Her husband finally said, "At least wipe the sauce off your face." And she laughed and got up. Everything was comped on their ticket including alcohol. It was the only tray I ever dropped and they never made me use legs again. They came back in and asked for me the next week. The husband told me they were celebrating 30 years together that night. I felt horrible. Then he told me on their first date she made spaghetti and accidentally dumped it in his lap. He told her it was karma and they had a huge laugh, and a free meal. Witnessed a sequel on their first date having a few drinks. Started making out by the 3rd. Dude cried by the 4th. Started sucking on her finger. Cried again. Abruptly ran out of the bar and down the street. She paid, came back 2 weeks later. I pretended not to recognize him to be nice, and he brought it up. "I think you served me on a date 2 weeks ago." "I don't know man, I serve a lot of people." "Yeah, it was you, remember?" I cried and ran away. Bruh. "Greater than yeah, it was you, remember?" I cried and ran away. I can't tell if this is a power move. Total power move. Own it sister. Work at a bubble tea restaurant right near a college. It's a nice hangout spot with dim lighting, comfortable furniture, and board games. A lot of first dates happen here. Probably the worst I've ever seen was this guy that looked somewhere between 17 and 19 years old who met up with this girl around the same age. They got teas and took a seat at a table and played a board game and talked. His mother sat at the table next to him the entire time and just stared them down. It made me feel so bad for him, but the icing on the cake is when she goes up to them at 8:30 and tells them that it's time for the 2 of them, her and her son that is, to head home. The guy is visibly pissed but says goodbye to her and follows his mum out. Girl comes up to order another tea and I asked her about it. She was more than happy to fill me and the other girls in. This lady had essentially injected herself into the date, interrupting their conversation and critiquing her son's behavior. I once saw a guy try and impress his date by pretending to know about wine. He then proceeded to pronounce every single wrong one. I don't even know how I would phonetically write out his butchering of Chablis and Sauvignon Blanc. Date looked at him like he'd just taken a shit on the table. See Chablis. Sauvignon. Bartended for a decade. For a while I was at a medium-range Italian restaurant. More than once I saw a first date go awry because one of the 2 drank too much. Most memorable was a woman who started downing rum punches. They were at a table so I couldn't see them and I guess the waiter had forgotten his red light, yellow light training. I don't know if they still do that. After the sixth one I asked if these were all going to the same person and he said yes. I was like, oh shit. Sure enough, girl ended up puking all over my bathroom and locking herself in. When we got the door open she was passed out and there was puke everywhere including all over her. No cab would touch her so the guy ended up taking her home. He came in a week later and said they were going on another date. I was skeptical. They've been married for about 15 years and are absurdly happy. She avoids rum punches. That's oddly wholesome. Except for all the puke, of course. Think of the money she saved on getting her stomach pumped. I had a table I'm pretty sure was a married couple, in their 50s, clearly together, etc. So call it a date anyways as they were out for dinner together, so it qualifies in a way. They both ordered draft beer. When I was bringing it out, I came to the table and the woman was screaming and crying uncontrollably. The man bending over her. I thought she was having a medical emergency. Turns out she got a call that a parent had died. The man turned to me and shoved a card at me, asking to pay because they have to leave ASAP. And I said it's okay, they had not had anything. I was still holding the beers. And get this, I got a write-up for doing this. As if I was going to make these people pay for 2 beers they never even sipped because a genuine emergency happened so that giant big corporation can add $12 to their $600 million. I served a table where the woman looked frightened and had a body language like she's leaning away from the guy while gathered tight. My co-workers would ask me if she's okay after they passed through my section. The guy was sitting and leaning over the table, looked like he was invading her space. Angry looking guy. He talked to her like she was a dog that just pissed on the rug. When he went to the bathroom I asked if she's okay and she said yes. I doubt he got a second date though. Well, I hope not. Sound like he didn't respect her at all.